Hey Peanuts, so today we're on Unit 7, Lesson 11. It says discuss symmetry around the ones. So we all know ones is where everything starts and the symmetry starts around the one. And if I look at this, if I go to the left, this is a one spot and we know to the left of the decimal is always a one. If it's two spots, it's then the tenths. And the third spot is the hundreds. And it's kind of easier doing it to the left than the right because we're used to these being the ones, 10, 13, 14, hundreds. We know the place value for those. We're just familiar with it. Now, when we work to the to the right, it gets a little bit more challenging. It's really dividing by 10. We're going to the left is multiplying by 10. So if we go to the right, it's tenths. And a lot of people get confused with this because you feel like the one isn't the starting spot. You feel like it should be called the ones or something like that, but it's really the tenths. The ones is the only one that has it. But based off that, then to the left is tens, and to the right is tenths. If I go to the right again, it'd be dividing this by 10 again, or dividing from the ones by 100. So that's why it's called hundredths. Now, the beautiful thing about this is if you can read this, you can do the fraction. For example, this is one whole. One whole is always going to be the numerator and the denominator are going to be the same. So if the ones is 1, it'd be 1 over 1. If I go to the tenth spot, it'd be 1/10. And 100 spot, it'd be 1 over 100. So for example, tens, it's 10 over 1 because 1 goes into 10 10 times. And hundreds, 100 over 1 because it goes in 10 times. Remember, we're multiplying to go to the left and dividing going to the right. Now, when talking about money, which also works, $1 would be your whole. If you move to the left, $10 would be tens and $100 would be 100. Well, now we're dividing that. If we divide $1 10 times, you're going to get 10 cents. Now, if you divide $1 100 times, you're going to get 1 cent. So discuss the symmetry and relationship you see in the place value chart. I think that was a really good discussion around it. Now, the second question is it easier to see place value patterns in A or B? Discuss why. So A, if you look at this, the 500 is the same, the 50 is the same, the 5 is the same, but this is where it starts to change. There's no 0 in front, but there's a 0 here. Just like there's a 0 here and a 0 here. Realistically, this is the same thing as this, and this is the same thing as this. But why it might be easy for you to understand this is if I look at this, this is showing it's a center. And going to the left for the tens, there's a 0 and a 5. Well, a 0 and a 5. So it's kind of balancing each other out. Where up here, it's just a 5. And a lot of people are feeling like there should be something there to balance it out. So just like here, there's 500 has 2 zeros. Well, in the hundredth spot, there's 2 zeros. So some people, everyone's different, but it might depend on how you feel and how it works for you independently. Now the next one says show and read decimal numbers. So if I put a 4 here, that's I'm going to have to multiply that by 10, so it would be 40. And I'd multiply it by 100, it'd be 400. Now, if I went to the right, I'm taking that 4 and dividing it by 10. So that should be 4/10. And now I'm dividing it by another 10, so it'd be 400ths. Now, the other thing we can do is just write the fraction. So ones, to make it a whole, it'd be 4 over 4. No, that equals 1. I'm lying to you. Don't do that. Don't do that. That equals, well, I guess it does equal 1. If I took 4 over 4, it equals 1. So if I went to the right, 4/10, it would be 4/10. And 400ths, I'd write 4 over 100. And over here, it would just be 40 over 1 and 400 over 1. because 1 goes into 40 times. You're trying to get that whole number. So sorry, this would be 4 over 1. That's where because 1 goes into 4 times. Hopefully that helps out a little bit. So let's move on to the next page. And it's a little trickier. Sorry, I'm trying to see how many. Oh, 1 page and that's it. So now it says read and write each mixed number as a decimal. So when I look at this, you're like, oh man, I finally understood what this 1/10 was. So you're right. You would go 1/10 like that. But what do I do with that 3? That's my whole number. So the 3 goes in front because that is my whole number. 3 and 1/10. The decimal is and. 3 is your whole. 3 and 1/10. So let's do one more together. Let's just read it. I would read this as 5 and, because it's separate, 5 and 7/100. So if you can read it like that, you can solve it. 5 and 7/100. I would write 5 as a whole, and is my decimal. 7/100. I put the 7 in the 100 spot, which is right there, and add a 0. 5 and 7/100. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to try to do 5 and 6 and then check it with mine. So here it says 2 and 46/100. So I would write 2 and 46/100. That's the 10th spot, that's the 100 spot. So I ended in the correct spot. And now number 6 says 28 and 9/10. 28 as your whole, and is your decimal, 9/10. So the 9 goes in the 10th spot. So now we're going to reverse it. Read and write each decimal as a mixed number. So I'm going to read this, 12 and 8/10. So 12 is my whole number. It goes before 12, and is my fraction, and 8/10. So 8 over 10. Now let's look at number 8. 3 and 5/100. So 3 and 5 over 100. 3 and 5/100. Pause it, try 9 and 10, and then check it. Go to number 9. It would be 4 and 85/100. And number 10 is 49 and 7/10. Read each word name, then write a decimal for each word name. So this says 61/100. So it's a decimal, and I need to go to the 100 spot. That's my tenths, that's my 100. 61/100. So number 12 reads 6 and 14/100. So this is telling me there's a decimal. 6 and 14/100. So I need, that's my tenths, hundredths, 14/100. 6 and 14/100. I want you to pause it, do number 13 and 14, and then check with me. 13 says 70 and 8/10. Good job. The and lets me know there's going to be a decimal. So 70 and 8/10. So 8 over, I'm not writing in decimal. Lying to you. 8/10. 70 and 8/10. 14, 55 and 6/100. My decimal again. 55 goes in front. 6/100. So that's a 10th spot. That's a 100 spot. 6, 55 and 6/100. So this is the what part? Oh, expanded form. So it wants it a little different. Okay, this makes me happy. I thought they wanted to write it all out. 8 and 2/10. So for this one, I would say, oh, this is a whole. So I'd write it 8 plus 2/10. So if I looked at 16, I got to break it all apart. To get this, I would take 10 and 7, and then I would need the 4/10 and the 5. So I'd have to take 10 plus 7 plus, here's where I got the 4 from, plus 5/100. I'm going to do one more with you because I think this might be a little confusing. So I'm going to look at this. I need one for each number. So here I'm going to add 5 different things. The 1 is in the 100 spot, so I'm going to write 100. Oh, I'm lying to you. I don't need to write. This is a 0, so I don't need to write anything. But the 6 is in the 1 spot, so I have to do this because 100 plus 6 is 106. Plus, I need to do the 2. It's 2/10. And then I need to do the 4, which is 400s. If you want to write it with the zeros in front of each one, you are more than happy to. It's the same thing. So I want you to try to do 18, 19, and 20. And then come back. So if I look at 18, I have the 5 in the 50 spot. I mean in the hundreds, the 10 spot. And there's nothing in the 1 spot, so I don't need to worry about it. There's a 0. So I'm going to look at this 7. It's 7/10. And right here, 7/100. So 50 plus 7/10 plus 7/100. 19. Start with a 3. You have 300. The 1 is in the 10th spot. The 2 is in the 1 spot. Oh, my dog broke out. Plus, this 0 means you don't have to do anything, but the 9 is in the 100 spot. And if you look at 20, you have the 6 in the 100 spot, the 9 in the 10 spot, the 3 in the 1 spot, the 2 in the 10th spot, and the 4 in the 100th spot. There we go. So 21. There are 100 centimeters and 1 meter. A snake crawls 3 meters and 12 more centimeters. What decimal represents the number of meters a snake crawls? Wow, this can be really challenging. Well, the meter, 100 meters in a meter. So a snake crawls 3 meters and 12 more centimeters. So this would be your whole number, because that is the one that 100 goes into it. So it'd be 3 and 12 tenths. So 3 and, I'm not tenths, 12 hundredths. Because it went 12 spots out of 100. Now, if I look over here, there are 100 pennies and $1. A jar contains $20. You add 8 pennies to the jar. What decimal represents the number of dollars in the jar? So you have $20, which is your whole, and 8 pennies. That one's a lot easier because it'd be $20.08. Those last two, if you don't understand, that's okay. I get that can be really confusing. Again, let me know if you're not understanding this so we can work together, or I make this a 2-day assignment. I miss you guys. I love you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.